He's co-founder of the Radical Independence Campaign, tireless campaigner for social justice in Scotland. Please welcome Jonathon Shafi.
Every time I've heard Saffron speak, I always think to myself, I wish that everyone in Scotland could hear what was just said there. Because I'll have to say this, if you're still a no voter now, there's nothing I'm going to be able to say that's going to convince you. If after hearing that, if after hearing the kind of vision from someone, from this panel, everyone that's been concerned so far tonight, then I think the argument's lost on you. But I want to start by saying something not about the debate, but about the process. Because over the last 2 years, Scotland has been alive. It's been alive with political debates. It's been alive not just at public meetings like this that have taken place the length and breadth of Scotland, but in homes, in workplaces, in universities and schools. The people of Scotland have been discussing politics like never before. And in a world where politics is a letdown for the majority of people, that's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing for people to engage with something which for decades has failed them, which for decades has led to growing inequality, and which for decades has seen the poorest of the poor suffer the most, while the very richest get even richer. The richest 200 people in the UK have got a combined wealth of £318 billion. That's increased by 10 times since 1989. But it's increased by 15% in the last year alone. Crisis? What crisis? In the last year, over 1 million people have relied on emergency food aid, at the same time as the rich are growing richer. What kind of a society allows that to happen? What kind of a political system thinks that that's reasonable, and what kind of an economic system accepts that? Westminster does. The City of London does. They have done for decades, and it's not just that they continue to accept it today, they are intensifying that process. People talk about risks if we vote yes. Let me outline to you tonight some of the risks if we vote no. The process of privatisation that we are currently enduring, the process of austerity that we are currently bearing the brunt of, is not a flash in the pan. This is an agenda. It's what's called permanent austerity by David Cameron. Now you might think to yourself that the Labour Party will change it if we were to vote no, then vote Labour. But the Labour Party have signed up hook, line and sinker to every single one of the austerity agenda policy items. Every single one of them. Whether it's the welfare cap, whether it's cuts on public spending, or whether it's the privatisation of key public services. Let's not forget that the process of privatisation in the NHS started with the Labour Party, with foundation hospitals. Now, the poll that was out recently, which showed, by the way, we are going to win, which showed 47% of people now voting yes. If you dig into the statistics, you'll find that if you're over 60, you're more likely to be voting no, and there's a reason for this. The reason is that after 1945, after World War II, a consensus was come to in the UK. That consensus was based around public services. It was based around progressive taxation. That's what happened after World War II. Many of you in this room will know that. But after Thatcher, a new consensus was developed. That consensus was about privatisation, was about an upwards distribution of wealth and power. And by God, have they been successful. Westminster is a huge success story for a tiny clique of people at the very top of British society. It's a huge success story. How have they managed it? How have they managed to get away with it for so long? But if you're younger, I'm 28, all I've seen, like Saffron, from any government in Westminster is illegal wars, is cuts, is privatisation, is growing inequality. is a disregard for those who are vulnerable in society, but more than a disregard. Because when the financial crisis happened, when we are going through this austerity, who is getting the blame? They're scapegoating the immigrants. They're scapegoating those on benefits. They're attempting to rationalise their economic and political decline by blaming poor people. That's what they're doing. And if you accept that, vote no. But if you say to yourself that here's an opportunity to break from that, we used the slogan in the Radical Independence campaign to sack the Tories. Wouldn't it be nice if the shoe was on the other foot for once? Because that's what happened if we vote yes. It's a P45 for Osborne, for Cameron, for Clegg, for the lot of them. For the millionaire cabinet who dare to decide where money will be spent and where it will be cut. The privatisation of the NHS has already been discussed in detail. It was mentioned about who made these laws. Isn't it funny that the same people that made these laws are the same people who have benefited from the privatisation of the NHS? Doesn't it make you think that every single time something is privatised, it's a friend of David Cameron, it's a friend of the Tory elite who benefits financially? It's a system run by the rich, for the rich. When I say rich, by the way, I mean the super rich, the mega rich, the millionaires and the billionaires, the huge corporations. We're talking about scapegoating. What about the corporations who don't pay tax in this country? Where is it going to end? I'll tell you where it's going to end. It's going to end with a situation where the people that need public service are not going to have it. Think about it this way. If you've got plenty of money, if you're a millionaire, do you need public services? Of course you don't. You don't need the NHS. You pay for private healthcare. You don't need to worry about transport. You've got your private jet. And if that's the way society is going to go, well, I've got nothing to do with it. In fact, I think everyone who's voting yes currently understands this. And it's been interesting, just to go back to the process, that the principle in this entire debate has not been nationalism. It's not been feeling of Scottish pride, though that exists, and why shouldn't it? But it's been about social justice. It's been about democracy. It's been about an antidote to decades of decline, deliberate decline, on behalf of those who have ruled us. They have some choice words for how they describe us. The Radical Independence campaign, some of you may have seen, we've targeted our canvassing and our discussions on the doorsteps in areas of low voter turnout, places where apathy doesn't reign, but alienation does, because why would you vote when all the parties are the same? And our statistics have shown that people are voting yes, because it's already been said, oh, it's stupid. They realise an opportunity when they see one. And the UK Together campaign strategist who was asked about this by the Telegraph had this to say: we're not worried, because people with mattresses in their gardens don't decide the outcome of elections. That's their attitude. That's their attitude to people who are finding their voice. I got a phone call yesterday. We've been doing a lot of voter registration drives all across Scotland. I got a phone call yesterday from someone who had been on the voter registration stalls in Easterhouse. And he phoned up and he was emotional. He was very emotional. In fact, he was almost in tears. And he was almost in tears because hundreds of people that day had registered to vote. Hundreds of people who had never voted in their lives. Hundreds of people who, not only had they never voted, but went on the register. And he said that he couldn't believe what he was saying. Hundreds of people, not just registering to vote, but having a discussion about why they're voting yes, about the possibilities they see before them if there is a yes vote. And when you hear a story like that, and that story can be replicated many times over, you'll all have your own individual experiences of this referendum. But when you hear stories like that, it does give you hope, because they can only run a society in the way they've been running it if we decide to let them. They can only override our ambitions for social justice, for equality, for public service and social security, for peace, if we allow it. And this, to me, is what it all boils down to on September the 18th. Are we going to continue to allow them to get away with it? Are we on the September the 18th, given that on that day we will have the power to decide the outcome of that referendum? Are we going to choose to give it back to the people that have failed us, or are we going to decide to take it for ourselves? And here there's an important word: responsibility. This is about responsibility, and it's time that we took responsibility for our own affairs, because we've got a different vision to the one that comes from Westminster. People talk about Scotland being on a different planet from Westminster. I lived in London for a year. I'll tell you something, that London, large parts of it, are on a different planet from Westminster as well. That's why Boris Johnson is ordering a water cannon. I don't know if you saw that. But this is the way it's going, and that's what it boils down to on the 18th. So I'll end on this, a message for each of the demographics in this room: no, yes, and undecided. If you're no at the end of this meeting, I don't think we're going to be able to convince you. That might sound pessimistic, but after hearing the arguments about social justice, democracy, after seeing the sort of talent that's coming through in terms of a new political horizon emerging through the process of this referendum, if you're still not convinced it's a good idea that that momentum continues after a no vote, after a yes vote, then I don't think we can convince you. But I hope that you will leave with some considerations. If you're undecided, if something is holding you back, if it was currency, if it was fear about some or other economic problem, then I hope that you will leave tonight a yes voter, willing on the 18th of September to take part in history. And if you're a yes voter, as the majority in this room are, that we redouble every single effort that we possibly can, because we stand now on the verge of making history. That's what we stand on the verge of. And it won't be history for Alex Salmon. It will be the people. Don't you realise, don't you see that the entire debate now, the entire narrative now, is about the people of Scotland peacefully, democratically, organising, discussing and debating, and coming towards the conclusion that a yes vote is the way forward. And I'll end on this. It was mentioned before, the world will be watching. And we've got to ask ourselves a question about what sort of world we want to live in, and what sort of role we want to see ourselves play in the world. Do we want to live in a world where we send people off to kill and die in places like Iraq? The loss of life there, the current situation there. Do we want to live in a world where we're responsible for that? Do we want to live in a world where our Prime Minister, someone like Tony Blair, who caused the crisis in Iraq, who sent people off to die, is the Middle East peace envoy? Do we want to live and have our role in the world known as being the people who base, as was already said, 30 miles outside Glasgow, a battalion of nuclear weapons, hundreds of them, each one of them 7 times as powerful as the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima? Forget the economics when it comes to that. Or do we want to say to the world on September the 18th, with a smile on our face, with a positive ambition, with renewed objectives, that we did it, that we stood up for ourselves, that we rejected the past, and that we took responsibility for forging a future in which the people come first?